Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh and welcome to some more Gran Turismo Sport, a racing game developed by Polyphony Digital and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 4. Focusing on the game's online mode, known as Sport Mode, in this episode I take a look at my performance in the first race of the 2020 Manufacturer Series season, which was a Group 3 race held at the Autodrome Lago Maggiore GP circuit. Before we get racing, it should be noted that this year I've switched from Honda to Renault Sport. Reason being, I felt really proud of what I accomplished with Honda in 2019 and wanted to bring that success to another manufacturer. In testing the 20 plus manufacturers available, I found myself really enjoying the Group 3 and Group 4 cars available to Renault Sport and felt they would give me the opportunity to improve my racing abilities considerably over this year's 40 race season in terms of both car management and battling with other drivers. With that, let's get racing. Taking a look at the grid then, you'll see that we qualified 5th with a 1:57.3. Qualifying went well in that I beat my target time of 57.5, but fell a little bit short of my personal best in practice at 57.2. I was still very pleased to see that I was only 3 tenths off the pole position, which went to a Porsche from Austria, great lap by them, and that meant I had a good chance of finishing on the podium here or getting the win if I played my cards right. Now as for the race itself, this was a 13 lap race, 20 drivers, all of us being A driver rating. And the combination of fuel consumption and tyre wear here meant that it was a good mixture of strategies. This would make for a fantastic race. In that at one end, one of us having the option of the racing medium or the racing hard tyre, you could use the racing hard tyre to conduct a no-stop, but you'd be off pace for the majority of the race compared to the other strategies, so you'd have to drive the car conservatively to save your fuel and not fight too much until the very end. In the middle you'd have the one stop, which is starting on the mediums, switching to a set of mediums on either lap 6 or 7 and then going to the end of the race. With fuel saving, you wouldn't need to take fuel in the pits or just a very little amount. Alternatively, you could go for the very aggressive 2-stop, which would be starting on the mediums, switching to a set of mediums on lap 5, and switching to a third and final set of mediums on lap number 10, and going all out to try and make your way up the order. My choice was to go for the 1-stop. I felt very comfortable in driving the Group 3 RS01 Renault Sport car in a conservative fashion, which would enable me not to have to take any fuel on the pits and make the most of the 2 sets of racing mediums. And I would be pitting on lap number 7, so I'd be a bit more racy towards the end and use more of the tyre, particularly on the final 2 laps. As we're coming down to the final couple of cars on the grid here, what you're going to see is in the opening stages of the race, I'm not going to be pushing, I'm going to be holding back from the leaders and just trying to stay within the slipstream zone of 1.5 seconds behind 4th place. Obviously I've got to be wary of potential overtakes from behind, but we'll have to see how that plays out with the strategy combinations. But as we're about to get underway, I switched to fuel mode 6 in order to save some fuel during the rolling start procedure. And in the vein of the Formula 1 season, which has been postponed this year due to the outbreak of COVID-19, we'll get underway very shortly and we'll do it in the fashion of Formula 1. As we're coming down to the start-finish straight here, the timer's going to come up on the screen and count down 3, 2, 1. It's lights out and away we go. So shifting up into 2nd gear, then up into 3rd rapidly. We're heading down to turn 1, a left-hander coming down to 2nd gear for turn 1. We're going to get a rather nice line through here, just being conservative on the brakes here, not overstepping it into the corner. We can see behind there's a bit of fighting going on between the FT1 Toyota in 6th place and the Peugeot RCZ, who took a look up the inside from 7th position, but nothing's changed there. We've got a little bit of oversteer coming out of turn 2 there, what have it been, a very low speed corner in 1st to 2nd gear. So we just need to settle the rear end of the Renault down at this point, get the tyres warmed up and get underway. Now in terms of the overall settings of this car, I'm using a brake balance of -2, or in other words, I'm moving the brake balance 2 towards the front. This is to assist with the balance of tyre wear. What with the RS01 being a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car, it wears its rear tyres a lot more than its front tyres, but with this brake balance setting, I actually found I was able to equate the front tyre wear with the rear tyre wear, and this actually made the car very nice to drive. during extended stints, where I'd find, and you're going to see it here, later on in my stints where tyre wear really becomes a factor, I could still drive the car at a comfortable pace and not run the risk of binning the car too easily. Now, as we're coming onto the back straight here, heading down towards turn 11, or Big Banky Boy as some YouTubers call it, such as Super GT, what you're going to see is I've shifted up into 7th gear. This was not something I had in the Honda NSX last year. 7th gear in the RS01 is an overdrive gear. You can attain towards your top end speed, but more importantly, the usage of this gear, as we see the FT1 behind, clipped the curb coming out of turn 11 there and put it into the wall. Unfortunate for them, it does happen. I've experienced it in practice, but fortunately we haven't experienced it so far in the race. They were pushing quite hard by looks of things. The application of 7th gear is that way you actually reduce the amount of engine power being used, and so you're going to be cutting down the amount of fuel usage because you're in that higher gear situation. So instead, we're using that to save some fuel in addition to shifting up no higher than 6,500 RPM, and in doing so that means we're already making considerable efforts towards fuel savings, so that way we don't have to take any fuel in the pits. Whereas the guys in front are probably doing a bit of fuel saving, but at the same time they are really fighting one another, and that means I'm not falling off the back of the pack that are chasing first place right now. And we can see, looking at our rear view mirror, it looks as though our little pack of 5 cars has started to break away from the rest of the pack. But then if we look at the time on the left hand side of your screen, what you're going to see is because we've all gone quite slowly through turns 2 and 3, it meant that the rest of the pack is now catching up to us. And this was a bit unfortunate and something that was irritating me at this point in the race. The fact that the guys in front seemed more insistent on fighting only 2 laps into a 13 lap race, rather than thinking, hey guys, let's pull away from the rest of the pack, and once we've done that, then let's worry about doing a little bit of fighting and some key fuel saving, because then it means that it's a race for first between 5 cars, not between, say, 10 cars. But still, you can't have it all your own way, and I'm just settling into the fact that I'm going to stay behind this pack. I'm not going to fight, I'm just going to save the fuel. Now, as we go into turns 6 through to 10 for the second time of asking, if you take a look on the left hand side of your screen, particularly the bottom left hand side, what you see is that tyre wear so far, we started to take off the top layer of the medium tyres all around, and that's that balance of tyre wear coming into effect. But more importantly, if you look at the brake gauge, which is just to the right hand side of the speedometer, as we come into turn 11 here, note how I'm not applying full braking force all the time going into these corners anymore. Instead, I'm actually applying somewhere between 80 to 90% braking force and trying to keep the braking force around that point. What this is doing is actually helping me to manage the wear on the tyres, because I'm not locking up the brakes and putting additional wear through the tyres, particularly the rear tyres in this instance, and by doing so that means that I'm able to utilise my tyres for longer and they'll be fresher as I go deeper and deeper into my racing stints. Now, if you do a comparison with one of my videos in the Honda during the 2019 season, you'll find that in the majority of cases I was using full brake power in every single corner where I had to brake hard. And on top of that, I was locking up the brakes, causing dust to come out of the brake disc and putting additional tyre wear in the car as we get a little bit sideways coming out of turn 17 there, wrapping up lap number 2. So this is all part of me trying to manage the car better, and I find that the Renault really needs you to manage its tyres, because this is a very difficult car to drive the deeper and deeper you go into a race if you haven't managed your tyres well. Now I go a little bit deep into turn 1 there, and the Peugeot comes up close behind, but no time's really lost. And again, I'm getting a bit caught up at this point because I just want to drive the car conservatively, but I'm finding that the Subaru and the Mercedes fighting for third at this point are really slowing me down. As a result, it's causing the Peugeot behind to actually catch up. So what I'm trying to do is just give myself a tiny bit of breathing room, so that way I'm not in a situation where I'm going to get caught out behind or turned in front. We can see here that the Porsche that was in first has had to take a penalty by the looks of things. That's to back out of it going into turn 5, and we've been able to pick up 4th place at this point. But unfortunately here, and again this comes back to the idea of not seeing the long-term vision in my opinion, the Porsche decides to take a look down the inside here going into turn 6, and you don't really want to be fighting through this section of the circuit, because now I've got to come off the racing line, they've got to come off the racing line, and it means we're both going to be very slow through this section. And the only redeeming factor here is the fact that we're still in the long distance slipstream of the Subaru in 3rd place. So as we come along here on the back straight heading up towards turn 11, you'll see that I'm going to continue my fuel saving practices, and the Porsche decides as we come into turn 11 here, they look down the inside initially, but as they come out they realise it's probably not worth it at this point. They haven't got the ability to get on the inside, so they back out of it. So I'm thinking now, perhaps you know what, the Porsche's actually started to see sense. I understand the frustration in that they've come down from 1st to 5th at this point, but there's plenty more racing to go, so I was really hoping they weren't going to go for any lunges. So as we come along here, going through turns 12 and 13 into 14, go for the standard braking point, and the Porsche goes for an absolutely savage lunge on the inside here. They make it work, but unfortunately, due to the state of the penalty system in Gran Turismo Sport at the moment, I get given a 4-second penalty for quote-unquote forcing another car off the track. So forcing the Porsche off the track. Now, I'm not going to critique the Porsche for the lunge. They made the move stick, fair enough to them. but unfortunately that 4-second penalty has scuppered our chances potentially of picking up a podium or the win here. Now at this point I could have just thrown the game in the bin and said, right, this race is over, I'm done, I don't want to take part in this anymore. But I decided, you know what, you're only in 6th, you're going to take a penalty, that's going to drop you down the order, so it'll drop you about 7 seconds off the leaders, but there's still plenty of racing to do. Let's see if we can get back to 5th place by the end of this one. So that was my target for the rest of this race now. Continue to drive the race, drive it smart, drive it sensibly, and see what kind of result I can pick up and whether I can redeem my initial starting position. So we're coming through turn 4 here, and as we're about to come across the penalty line, I'm going to pull all the way over to the right hand side to avoid blocking the racing line. And as we come down here, it's a very painful 4-second penalty down to 2nd gear. But fortunately for us, this actually works out really nicely, because as we're coming down into turn 5 here, we find that 9th and 10th, i.e. the Mercedes and the Jaguar respectively, just get past us, but the BMW M6 behind in 12th from Hungary doesn't get past us and instead tucks in behind us. And this means we've now got the tow of 2 very fast cars down a straight line all the way through the rest of the circuit. And if I can stay behind these guys on the straights and then close up to them in the corners, because I've got the better handling through the corners, as you can see here, in fact such good handling that I actually have to back off of the throttle coming over the apex of turn 9 to avoid bumping into the back of the Jaguar, because I don't want to give them a penalty through bump drafting. That seems to also be something the penalty system does at the moment. I don't want to hit the back of them, but at the same time I can just use them to pull me along, and I could be in 7th gear as we do so as we go into turn 11 for the 4th time of asking. Now I'll give a little bit of space here to the M6 behind, but what I didn't realise in retrospect, you'll note that if you look in the rearview mirror at the top of your screen, they are continuously flashing the lights when we're coming into corners. And that is because what they're actually signalling, I believe, is I'm not going to pass you, please drive the racing line, do not drive defensively. They're being quite smart in managing the race here, and that's something I need to pay a bit more attention to as they go very late on the brakes into turn 14. And what it turns out is, upon reflection of this replay in this race, that a lot of people were braking very deep into turn 14, whereas I was taking a very early braking point to take a much more gradual line through the corner. So difference in racing style there being reflected, but that's something I've come to enjoy with this Renault as well. I drive very differently in this Renault than I would in the Honda, despite both of them being mid-engine rear-wheel drive cars. But enough of that reflection, we're now on to lap number 5 and we're coming down to turn number 1 again. We switch to the replay camera, our good friend. And as we're going through this sequence of corners for Sector 1, just want to give a shout out to my buddy Callum, or Scorpion on 5PS, as known on the PlayStation Network for PS4, and that he put together the Azure Lane livery that you're seeing on the RSO1, and I'm going to be using this on the RSO1 for the entirety of the season. It's a little livery to commemorate my favourite character from both the gacha game on the mobile devices and also the anime Arc Roll, the British carrier. But enough of talking about liveries, as we're going down to turn 5 here for another time. Nothing too much is going to happen at this point, so just enjoy the replay. It's an absolutely wonderful track, Autodrome Lago Maggiore GP circuit, and the replay camera just makes it all the better. And this cloudy, misty setting, I do like it. I prefer it compared to the sunny setting. You get to focus more on the cars, albeit you don't get to see all the reflections bouncing off of them, but not to worry. We've got a nice clean run here through the section from turn 6 through to turn 10, completing sector 2. And we're really close behind the Jaguar in front at the moment, not closing up too much because we're on the straight, but we're in the ideal position to utilise the most out of 6th and 7th gear to do additional fuel saving. Now, let me put some statistics behind the fuel saving here to contextualise it and give you a point of reference. You start off with 100% fuel, 100% fuel tank. 13 laps would mean that if you were to do each lap with equal amounts of fuel without taking any fuel in the pits, you would need to use approximately 7.5% fuel per lap. That was the target, but I would try to save a little bit more than that to potentially give myself one lap where I could go full attack at the end of the race, at the final lap. A full attack lap would cost between 9 to 10% fuel, so just keep that in mind with regards to the fuel saving strategy. I would need to come into the pits with approximately 47% fuel left, and if I could, a little bit more than that, say 49%, so that way I could have the attack lap at the end of the race. But with that, we're coming around to the end of this lap. We can see a Mercedes, the one that was in ninth, pulling into the pits there. So they're on the 2-stop strategy, the aggressive 2-stop strategy by the looks of things. And we're coming across the line again. We can see somebody else has come out of the pits, another Mercedes, so they're on the 2-stop as well. And starting to notice people pit, and that's where we see the strategy starting to diverge in terms of race time, and we'll see them come back together at the end. But we're just following the Jaguar at the moment. Very grateful for this situation. We've got the M6 behind us, who's keeping a reasonable distance, but again using us to pull them along. And does become a bit of a slipstream train at these points in the race, but it's also about managing the car as you go through the slipstream train. And that's why I'm not too bored at the moment as I'm watching this back, or at the time when I was driving it, because it's all part of the strategy here. As somebody goes charging off the corner there at turn 5, Unfortunate for them, that means we pick up a place, and that's the thing as well. In these moments, focus has to be at its maximum. You need to nail each line consistently, you need to nail each braking point perfectly. And talking about nailing lines consistently, I'm about to pick up a half-second penalty for cutting off the track there just by a tiny margin on turn number 7. It's the first time I've done that in an FIA race, but you know what? So be it. It's going to happen at some point. Everybody picks up their first penalty in a given race at some point for cutting a track limit, and there it is. So now at this point I was thinking to myself, okay, it's a half-second penalty. Is it going to destroy your race? Probably not. Is it going to make things a little bit more difficult? A tiny bit, yes. So what I decided to do here was just drive normally, try to close up a little bit more to the Jaguar at the conclusion of this lap, and then going into the first part of sector 1 on the next lap, so lap number 7. Reason being, the penalty zone was between turns 4 and 5 down that straight, so as a result, if I could get close to the Jaguar, then I'd be able to utilise them to offset the penalty. But unfortunately they are pulling away. They seem to be more comfortable in their tyres at this point in the race, so I decided, you know what, let's not try to overdo it, let's just simply follow the circuit, let's just follow our standard racing line and come to the end of the lap and start the next one. And wherever we end up falling down to because of the half-second penalty, let's just try and keep it clean and not cause an accident. So coming to the end of lap number 6, then we can see a good number of cars are now pitting. These are the one-stoppers who decided to pit early, whereas we are going to be pitting later, so they're going for the undercut on the one-stop. We'll be going for what's known as the overcut, or just standard long stint. So coming through turn 2 here, shifting down to first gear. Not going to let the car get too squirrely as we come onto second gear there. And now shifting up into third for turn number 3, holding on to third gear rather than shifting up into fourth gear, and coming into turn number 4. Shifting down to, well, not shifting down to second, staying in third. We'd shift down to second if this was a qualifying lap to turn the front end of the car in more tightly. And we pull off the racing line to take a half-second penalty, and this works out perfectly in the fact the Lexus, who went for the undercut on the one-stop strategy, has actually just popped in front of us, and that means that we can use them just to give us a little bit of a pull coming up into the section now between turns 6 and 10, just to offset some of the penalty we picked up. And then we've got a nice gap to the guy behind in 7th, a Subaru, I believe the Subaru from Austria. We'll come back to them a little bit later. And as we're coming through turns 8, 9 and 10 here, you can see that we've fallen off the back of the Lexus already, what with them having the fresh tyres, we'd expect that, but they've helped us offset the half-second penalty a little bit, and that's absolutely perfect. Now looking over on the right hand side of your screen, you can see our lap time so far, and bar the ones where we've had to take penalties and the starting lap, we've actually had quite consistent lap times, and this is something I really wanted to focus on, as somebody seems to have got it wrong coming out of turn 11. There's a yellow flag, we'll keep an eye on that. You can see they've recovered onto the circuit. It looks as though it's one of the Mercedes SLS's. As they're going through at turn number 12 and 13, it's the Milka Mercedes. But looking at the lap times on the right side of the screen, that consistency is really showing through. And looking on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you can see how the tyres are very heavily worn now. They're worn to about 70 to 65% available grip. But at the same time, I'm still feeling very comfortable in driving the car at this point. As the Subaru took a look up the inside there into turn 14, we've got to be wary of that with everybody because we've seen that trend now. Coming to the end of our first stint then, we're shifting down to third gear for the final corner, turn 17, and we're going to rain to the pits just before the pit entry line, and we nail it, we get into the pits, and take a look how much fuel we've got left. So there, we had 51% fuel left. So, we are 4% ahead of where we should be in the fuel saving game. Now I started to think about this and what this could potentially mean as we come out literally at the end of a train of cars here in 12th place. Now we would have perhaps come out in 10th or 9th, if it weren't for the half-second penalty, but this has still worked out really nicely because look at things as they are, and what we can see is we've got a nice gap to the guy behind. As we switch to the replay camera, we've only got to worry about the guys in front, and this is where we can make up the places, because there's going to be drivers here on a two-stop strategy, so they're going to have to pit. There's going to be drivers here on a no-stop strategy, so they're going to be slow as they go to the end of the race and the hard tyre starts to fall off. I predicted on lap number 10 and 11 based on my simulation runs of doing the no-stop myself. And then there's going to be the fighting, and with a naturally better car going through the medium to high speed cornering sections, so particularly sectors 2 and 4, and that's where we can make the mood stick. So it's all to play for here, and with there being so many cars in these trains, it's very likely that whilst we're in 12th at the moment, we could have a chance of getting up to say 7th or 6th, or perhaps even getting all the way back up into 5th place, depending on how things play out. But for now, I'm doing more fuel saving. I'm letting the tyres come up to temperature, but I'm also saving fuel behind the train of cars here. Now you may be wondering, well, why am I not pushing the car really hard at this point because the tyres are at their maximum grip? Well, because I felt that everybody would have tyres that are relatively fresh, and so everybody could push hard at this point. So instead I decided to rely on my confidence in being able to drive this car hard when I've got worn tyres based on my new approach to driving the car and braking points, etc. And on top of that, the more fuel I could save now, the lighter my bearing would be on having to worry about fuel saving as I went into the final couple of laps. Now remember, I said earlier I'd be hoping to have one lap where I could push the car to its maximum performance at the end. So far it's looking as though I may have 2 laps available to me, and if I continue on this path of fuel saving, it could even be 3 laps. And imagine if I can do 3 laps where if I get the opportunity to really go for a move, I can push the car to its maximum. That means I'm going to be even more aggressive as we go deeper and deeper. Now we can see the fighting here is amongst a good variety of cars. Unfortunately, what happened there with the F-Type in front of us, it does look as though in the replay camera that I clipped the back of them, but that's not to be. What actually happened was, as the Jaguar and the BMW M6 went into the braking zone for turn 1, the Jaguar tapped the rear of the M6 and got caught on the rear of the M6 coming out of turn 1. So when both cars went on the power, what ended up happening was a snaking effect, where the M6 got on the power and actually lost the rear slightly and started going to the left. The Jaguar followed suit because they were in the snake train of the M6 tapping the back of them, and unfortunately whilst the BMW driver managed to get it back under control, the Jaguar did not. Hence why the Jaguar ended up spinning off of the corner, and now we picked up another position, so we're up into 11th at this point from what I recall. Now we're following the train of cars again, and it looks as though we've now got a Mercedes SLS that's fallen to the back of the train ahead. Now, one thing I did notice that this Mercedes seemed to be struggling very much so at this point in the race, really struggling for grip and overall pace. Now down the straight here, I haven't got the top end speed to get past the Mercedes despite the slipstream, and that's why the limiting factors of the RS01, it's not fast down the straights. It makes up for that in the corners, medium to high speed corners, not in the very low speed corners, I should point out. So with this in mind, what I thought to myself is, right, that Mercedes is probably going to have to pit soon. And what I should have done is just held off a little bit more, as we're about to see as we come through turn 13 heading up into 14 and 15. And we're going to see onboard camera. This is something I will learn from. So going into turn 14, I back out of it to make sure I don't try and lunge down the inside of the Mercedes. Going into 15 here, do the same. But unfortunately, I don't anticipate that the lack of grip on the Mercedes tyres means that they do need to brake a little bit. When I clip the rear of them, there's no harm done. Neither of us get a penalty for it. The penalty system behaves at that point. And I do pick up the place. Now, if the Mercedes didn't pit at this point, I would have backed off and actually given the place back, because that was an unfair pass in my opinion. I used contact in order to force them out the way and pick up a position. It wasn't intentional, but that's the way it played out. And here I just cut across the front of another Mercedes coming out of the pit. That's the Milka Mercedes. I should have the radar on then, but I didn't, so apologies to the Milka Mercedes driver for that. I won't cut them off in the future, or try not to, or any driver like that. But fortunately they were ghosted at that point, so neither of us made contact. And we come up to 8th position at this point. Now, this is effectively 9th position because the Milka Mercedes behind is on the 2-stop and is driving very aggressively, and they're going to come charging through. We pick up 7th here, or effectively 8th, because of the BMW who picked up a 4-second penalty, and that 4-second penalty was for the Jaguar going crashing into the wall earlier, which, again, did they deserve a 4-second penalty? Probably not, but that's not to be debated here. And then coming up into turn 6 through to 10, for the 10th time of asking, we're following another BMW M6 now, and this is the Hungarian driver from before. Now keep in mind that this driver, as far as I'm aware, has not actually pitted yet as far as I've seen. So they're on the hard no-stop strategy, which means they're going to be falling off the pace at this point, even more so than they're already falling off. We've got the Mercedes who's coming charging through at this point, they're using the top end speed. I've immediately gone into 7th gear. I'm not going to fight this. They're racing for the win, I'm not racing for the win. So I decided to let them through. Unfortunately here, because I lifted as well as broke, I lifted before went into the braking zone, that actually threw me off a little bit in terms of the available grip to the car and my line through turn 11, which meant I cut the apex a bit too tightly and then ended up sending myself off into the gravel. Now fortunately, I recognised that was going to happen and I decided to back off the throttle. If I got on the throttle too soon there or tried to power through it, then I would have sent the car spinning off the circuit, much like we saw the FT1 on the opening lap, and I did not want to repeat that. Anyway, coming back to what's happening here and now, we're still in the slipstream of the Mercedes and BMW in front, just at the very extremity of it, but that's going to pull us along. And here going through the final corner, we can take this corner very aggressively with our relatively fresh medium tyres and our comfort in the medium speed corners. And now we look at our fuel gauge here and look how much fuel we've got left, 29%. Noticing that, what that told me was right. Now I've got 3 laps worth of fuel and I can go on a charge, albeit not too much of a charge because there we almost went off the circuit coming out to turn 1, but I can be much more aggressive now in terms of my gear shifts. I can rev the car out and I can go hunt down positions, and we can see just off in the distance, approximately 4 to 5 seconds up the road, a Subaru who's sitting right now in effectively what is 5th place, and I want my 5th place back, so here we go. The Mercedes has already got past the BMW, that was to be expected, so we're going to go charging after the BMW at this point. and I'm going to try and get them as soon as possible. This is lap 11, so we've got a good amount of time to go. Getting it clean through turn 5, they're using the maximum extremity of the outside of the corner in order to be able to power out the corner, and now coming through turn 6 through to 10, we're going to get it relatively clean through here this time, albeit running the car in the dirty of another car in front means we have to take a bit more of a conservative line and be a bit more conservative on our throttle usage coming out of turn 8. Normally we'd go full send through that corner, i.e. full throttle, but we lifted slightly. And now coming down the straight here, what I'm doing is I recognise the fact I can't outrun a BMW M6 on the straight, even in the toe, so I'm actually in 7th gear right now. I'm going to be using that practice throughout the rest of this race to conserve what fuel I've got and just gradually close up to the back of them. Now we can see here that the BMW is flashing the lights, and what I get the feeling is they're signalling the guy in front that they're not going to be chasing after them, but on top of that they're signalling to me right now, look, get past me when you get close enough because I'm not fighting, because they keep flashing their lights, and I don't think that's to try and put me off. Now coming into 14 here, again, because I brake much earlier than most going into 14, I can't really make that move count. Now coming into 15, I look down the inside, but there's just not enough to go for it. And now coming out of this corner into 16, a little left-hander here, and 17, I'm thinking, right, if I get a really good run out of 17, I can get down the side of the BMW going into turn 1. And sure enough, we get a nice run in 3rd gear, shifting up into 4th gear, then up into 5th gear, and now we're going to drag our race our way down to turn number 1 and start lap number 12. And we can see how we're matched on speed here, and that's because the straight line speed, as I said earlier, of the RS01 is not that strong. The BMW's got quite a strong straight line speed compared to our own car, albeit not as strong as the BMW M3 GT, as we found out at the start of 2019. And we can see that yes, the BMW M6 behind is sketchy on their rear tyres at this point. They're definitely on that no stop, and they're making it work. They've done a good job, seeing as they started right down towards the back of the grid, and right now they're in approximately, if I remember correctly, 8th place. Now, having got past them, we're now chasing after the Subaru, who's picked up a half-second penalty, it would seem. I'm not sure what for, but at this point the Subaru's in 6th, I'm in 7th, the BMW behind's in 8th, because we have to keep in mind there's also another no-stopper in front, and that is a Honda NSX from Russia, who started this race, if you may recall, in 12th position. And they've done a fantastic job on no-stopping with the hards. The NSX has a good strength in that it can do no-stop strategies, what with its great fuel consumption, and also it's reasonable tyre wear if you measure the tyres accordingly. But we can see the NSX in front is really falling off the pace, and what with the Subaru in front really having a difficult time getting through turns 6 through to 10 here, I've actually had to back off the throttle because I'm so close to the rear of them. And the problem is, I get a really good run through turns 6 through to 10, and if somebody in front of me does not get that good run, I have to lift out of it because there's only one line through those corners. But that causes me to lose all of my speed going down the straight towards turn 11. And as you can see, I'm right up the backside of this Subaru right now, the one who I'm going to be fighting for 5th place effectively when we both get past the Honda, because we're closing up on the Honda really quickly, and I really want to get past this Subaru because they're a good handling car as well, but my handling's better, I feel. And at this point I'm looking down the inside to go into turn 14, but again, because I brake earlier than most here, I can't quite get the move done. And I'm taking a look down the inside into turn 15, but they closed the door, which is fair enough because I'm not down the side of them. So we're going to be coming to the end of lap number 12 and coming on to lap number 13. And oh, it's so tantalisingly close. We could get 5th here if only we can get past the Subaru and make sure we get past that NSX. So, the NSX gets a reasonable run out of the final corner, going on to the start-finish straight for the commencement of lap number 13. The Subaru gets a good run, I get a good run, and we're all looking at it. I look down the middle of the two of them here, and as we come into turn 1, I decided to stay behind the Subaru, let them open the door on the NSX and get through alongside the Subaru, as the NSX gives us ample space, great respect from them as a driver, and they're going to now act as the rear gunner to hold up the Mercedes and the BMW M6 behind, and I'm going to be chasing down the Subaru for this final lap. Can we get it done? Well, we're just going to take it turn by turn. So going into turn 4 here, we get a reasonable run through, but the Subaru also gets a nice run out of the corner, and they've got a little bit more speed coming down the straight here to turn 5 compared to myself, so I'm going to stay right up their backside. We're both going to go into this corner. I'm going to try and brake as late as possible into this corner and see if I can go down the inside, but it's not to happen because they get a really nice braking point into the corner. And now here's the problem, as I look down the inside, and it's going to be the outside for turn 6. The Subaru's got the better pull out the corner, so they're going to be in front, but look how close I am to the back of the Subaru as we come through this section. And I'm actually trying to back the car off to avoid being too close as we come through turns 9 and 10, so that way I can get a huge run on them going into turn 11. And this time I'm a bit further back, and this is perfect because now I can use the slipstream effect plus my natural speed coming out of turn 10 in order to get as much speed as possible down the straight here into turn 11. But I'm made to go to the outside. The Subaru takes the inside, and I wouldn't normally do this, but we're going around the outside of the corner here, and we're going to have to make it stick if we can. The Subaru gives us space, we take our grip, we maximise our grip to the outside, outside, and as we come up the hill here, we're still side by side going up the hill into turn 12, but we'll have the inside line, and the Subaru, are they going to stay side by side? They do initially, but they have to back out of it because they're on the outside. They haven't got as much grip on the tyres anymore, and they can't maintain their speed, so it means we picked up 5th place, and now we're coming to the braking point for turn 14. Can we hold on just a little bit longer? We now have our braking point here. We can see the guys behind us starting to form a train behind us, albeit we're pulling away a little bit into turn 15. We now that perfectly in 3rd gear, shifting up into 4th now for turn 16, shifting up into 5th for turn 17 before braking down to 3rd for the last time. I'm braking down to 3rd here, we're getting nice on the apex here, and we're going to power through very gradually here, what of our tyres being quite heavily shot, particularly the rear left, and we come across the line in a recovered 5th place. What a race. It was a pity that we had to pick up that 4-second penalty, but still, take the positives in hand, and I was over the moon to have climbed back up from 11th to 5th place. I was targeting the top 5 finish here, and I got it. And that moves us on to the next race, which is Sunday the 22nd of March. It's a Group 4 race at Suzuka Circuit. I'll see you there. But until then, thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future episodes. As always, I have been TX141, and until next time, take care and drive safely.